What is going on, Colts Nation? And welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Cody and Derek, back with another one, guys. And today we are going to be discussing two of the biggest wild card positions for the Indianapolis Colts. Always an interesting conversation to talk about positions that, frankly, we don't know how it's going to turn out. We don't know really what's going to happen when it comes to these positions. It could go a couple different ways. And so today we picked two different positions that we were going to talk about, one on the offense and one on the defense. I'm sure, Derek, a lot of people already know what the offensive one's going to be, but defense is going to be an interesting conversation as well. So let's start actually with the defense here, Derek. Let's switch it up a little bit. Why not? Let's do it. So defense, I kind of was looking at all the positions. And, last year at this time, I believe we talked about the cornerback room and just the secondary in general, right? Because there were so many questions. There was all these young guys. There was all these things that were happening, right? There was injuries. There's all this stuff going on. We didn't 100% know what was going to happen. I think that kind of is true this year in certain ways for the defensive end position, the edge position for this team, because you know a little bit about what you have in this room, right? You obviously, you have Kwity Paye, who has been a solid player, nothing special. He's been a good run defender and probably an average pass rusher up to this point. And, you have Samson Ebukam, who you brought in a couple of years ago in free agency, who's coming off that Achilles injury, which is a big deal. You have Laiatu Latu, who you drafted last year. You still have Taekwon Lewis on your roster. And then obviously you drafted JT Tuimuluau as well in the draft in round 2. So it's kind of this hodgepodge of different players, from some veterans in the room now to some younger guys in the room. And I really don't know, Derek, how this is going to work itself out, because it could go a lot of different ways. And I don't 100% know how this is going to go. Now, obviously, the defensive end edge position, it's different than some other positions because there's going to be multiple guys that are, subbing in and out, through the course of a game. So you're going to see more than just, two guys at left and right end, right? You're going to see multiple different guys playing, that 5 tech. So when you're looking at this room in general, Derek, at these two end positions here, what do you think about this group?
Yeah, it's funny because I don't remember the last time that the Indianapolis Colts, had a 4-man rotation at the edge group so fluidly. You're going to have all 4 of these guys playing consistent numbers. Every single one of them is going to play a significant amount of time in these games this year. And that very well can be a good thing. You want to have guys that will remain more fresh throughout the time, and you feel like you now have a culmination of a few guys that, their skill sets kind of match a little bit of what you want to do in certain circumstances. But it can also be a bad thing in the sense that I feel, and especially since we've seen it a lot recently with the Indianapolis Colts, how they approach who's getting the minutes or who's getting the snaps, who's not, right? That's going to be a problem. I just said, that could very well be a good thing. But at the same time, I don't know if I trust the Indianapolis Colts right now to manage the situation that you have in front of you. Right? Because you have a Laiatu Latu and a Samson Ebukam, who are both clearly pass rush specialists. Then you have a JT Tuimuluau and a Kwity Paye, who are mainly just going to be run-stopping guys. But they also have the ability to get an occasional sack. That's true. Kwity Paye may be a little bit more likely just because he's older. He's been in the league a little bit longer. But I have questions about this group. One, about the health of the group, because, again, Kwity Paye, this last season was the first time in his first 4 years with the Indianapolis Colts that he really played a full year. And we saw what he was able to do. Samson Ebukam, as you said, coming off of that major injury, how is it going to impact him and his ability to play going forward? And for questions of how efficient is JT Tuimoloau going to be in this system? And for Laiatu Latu, the big question again is, will he break out? Will he start to be better and start having better numbers? Now, last year he was obviously influenced by the snaps, but this year that might end up being the same kind of thing, Cody, because you got all these edge guys. I'm just concerned about how all of this is going to merge together. You've obviously taken a strict investment in trying to get these guys formulated into here. But, I mean, Cody, there were even times last year, there were a lot of times last year when we saw Laiatu Latu being dropped back into coverage. Like, what are we doing? Like, what were we doing last year defensively when the guy who was consistently getting the most pressure on the quarterback was being dropped into coverage? Like, and just wandering around like he doesn't even know where he's at and doesn't know where he's going. Like, that's my problem, right? Because Charlie Partridge has clearly had issues with being able to fluctuate these guys in and out. And previous defensive coordinators and head coaches were incapable of getting some of the best guys out on the field at the right times. So there's a lot of questions, as you said before. And some of them have been answered, and there's a lot of them that haven't. And ultimately, we're just going to have to see how they all do this year and who is going to take that step and lead that group.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you just don't have a true number one guy right now who has emerged. Now, we hope that Laiatu Latu can take that leap this year, but you don't have that every down guy. And I think that's the problem is, you maybe have a guy that's decent at something, but you don't have a guy that's elite at anything at this point. Now, Latu has the traits to become an elite pass rusher, but he's nowhere near that right now. I mean, 4 sacks a year ago, it was a solid year for him, but he's definitely got a lot he's got to grow in. And, some other guys as well, you just need a guy to emerge to be that true number one. And I think if you can get that, that would help answer a lot of questions. And that's been the thing, frankly, Derek, like outside of the other position we'll talk about, that's been the biggest problem for Chris Ballard is he's taken swings at so many guys at the edge position. And honestly, the only guys that have really panned out up to this point have been free agents. Like that's been about the only guys that have put up anywhere near double-digit sacks. So, I mean, Kwity Paye would be about the only exception, and maybe Dayo Adangbo in 23. But for the majority of Chris Ballard's tenure, the draft picks haven't necessarily lived up to the expectations. And even then, like the guys that had 10 sacks, they weren't on the roster for super long. So you haven't had a guy for 3-4 years plus that has done that at a consistent level. So you absolutely need that. So there are a lot of questions. There's certainly a lot of potential with this group, and hopefully, Partridge under Lou Anarumo can help utilize these guys better than they did a year ago. I'm hopeful that that does happen. But yeah, it'll be really fascinating to see, what do they do with these different linemen because there's 4 or 5 guys that could get some serious snaps. So I'm very curious how that does pan out. But anything else you want to say here about just defensive end that I didn't mention, or maybe anything you heard me say that you want to touch on before we jump into the second position here?
I don't really have any more to add to it. I mean, kind of like how it was the majority of the secondary last year. It's kind of the majority of the defensive line here too, because we can make the arguments for the defensive tackle group as well. So it's going to be an interesting year for the defensive linemen for the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, no doubt at all. All right, well, let's talk about the other position. I mean, we knew we were going to talk about it when we heard the idea of wild card position. The quarterback position has to be kind of like the prototypical one right now when you think of this idea of a wild card position, right? Because we truly just don't know how this is going to go. I think it could go a multitude of different ways, but I think some of the more popular ways that it could go would be, number one, it doesn't go well. It's basically what it was a year ago. Both quarterbacks, Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones, play like they did last year. You have probably the worst quarterback room in the NFL. It could go that way. Or you have Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson become even an average player, become a competent quarterback. Now, I think a lot of people obviously have taken sides at this point on who that's going to be. Daniel Jones obviously got some of the reps there in minicamp and stuff with Richardson, sidelined until training camp, but it seems like he's going to be ready to go. So it's going to be a big battle in training camp to see who does take home QB1 at the end of the day. What are your thoughts just on this position that I just think is so volatile? And we frankly don't know how it's going to go and really could dictate on, are the Colts a playoff team or are the Colts picking in the top 5? Like, honestly, it could.
Yeah, you have a good chunk of Indianapolis Colts fans that are already in full tank mode at this point. They're just like, they just want both these quarterbacks to fail. And then their grand pitch is to pray that Arch Manning decides to enroll in the draft early and just take him, which will probably likely not happen. But, again, that's where most people are at this point. And it kind of just tells you the expectation that a lot of people have about this quarterback room. So if this quarterback room is even slightly better than that, then, a lot of people are going to be very happy with that. And, it's just like what we were talking about in the other video that we did where, this team has for so many years been just decent quarterback play away from getting to the playoffs, right? And, we made it to the playoffs in 2018 when Andrew Luck was still there. And then obviously in 2020 when Phillip Rivers was there. Because again, you had good quarterback play. Outside of that, you haven't really gotten that. You haven't, and even Gardner Minshew led team was, it was still like very close to playoffs. And Gardner Minshew was average at best, was most times below average, but, was average at times. So, like if you could just get average quarterback play from this group, whoever it is that's the quarterback, then it's just going to fix a lot of problems. And it's going to give this Colts fan base some actual hope that there's some positive outlook to where we're going.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. I know it's crazy. You're like, man, like, look, we're not going to say this team is a mediocre quarterback away from winning the Super Bowl. That we're nowhere close to that. Let's be honest at this point. Like, quarterback's going to drive all. Like, we know that. But like you said, like, you have been a team that has been knocking on the door of the playoffs, despite the fact that you haven't had even above average quarterback play. And honestly, since 2020, you haven't had that. Even Phillip Rivers was about a little bit above average, right? But your quarterbacks have been either way below average or average at best. And you've still kind of been sniffing around that 8 to 9 wins, which tells me you have talent on your team. But at the most important position in football, you don't have the quarterbacks that have taken you to the point where you need to. So, yeah, it really will be contingent on this team and, on the quarterbacks, where this team goes or doesn't go. That really will dictate a lot. It's a bummer because think if this team had a franchise quarterback, it'd be a perennial playoff team. So it's just crazy. But obviously you can't miss on the most important position in sports, and the Colts at this point have not hit. So there's going to be a lot of things that have to work their way out. And like you said, we'll see. Some people are not believing in either of these quarterbacks. Some people are warming up to the idea of Daniel Jones. Some people still believe in Anthony Richardson. So I guess we'll just have to see how it plays out, man. But it's going to certainly be a wild card nonetheless. Because I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to be surprised by whatever scenario comes out between the couple that we discussed, because it's kind of to that point where it could go a lot of different ways.
Yeah, true that. That's just the question that we're going to be having to answer every day at training camp. It's just how did Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson do? 'Cause that's just going to be the number one storyline for everything going on in training camp in Indianapolis this year.
Oh, you know it, man. You know it. It's going to be, I just know it's going to be a crazy year. It's going to be a lot of controversy. It's just going to be wild. I'm just buckle up for it, man, because the last year was wild and it's just a crazy season. And I just have a feeling we're in for another crazy one here. But again, we'll have to see. Maybe the quarterbacks will surprise us this year and we'll be a little bit more positive about that situation. But we'll have to see. Guys, like we said, but let us know your thoughts here on these two wild card positions for the Indianapolis Colts. What are your thoughts on the defensive end position and defensive line in general? What are your thoughts on the quarterback position? Let us know all those things in the comments down below. But guys, that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for tuning in. We greatly appreciate it. And as always, guys, go Colts.